Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain. Now, this story may have been somewhat overshadowed this week by the duplicitous duo's disgusting disaster tourism.
I think the palace and the machinery of the monarchy needs to take Harry and Meghan more seriously and make sure that Harry and Meghan's antics don't impact the future of the crown.
And I will say, Meghan is a pretty good liar.
All Harry and Meghan need to do is prove to us that she popped those babies out. And that's all they need to do. And if they don't, it is unfair on the children. It's also unfair on the royal family.
Here, the doctor talks about both the children and listen to what she says.
Everything she's done has only drawn more speculation and brought the controversies back up about how Meghan and Harry have handled all of this, as well as the rumors that perhaps they used a surrogate for one or both of the children.
That bump had more air in it than the fantasies that Meghan and Harry go around divesting themselves of in their 16 bathrooms.
In this case, about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump, the fact is Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince Archie. Well, especially given the amount of rubbish that she was put through from the online trolls, so much was driven, as we spoke about at the time, by the dastardly, awful Sussex squad.
This is absolutely insane that they thought they could get away with it, especially Meghan Markle and Harry. The con of the century, two cons of the century in the form of two royal children included in the line of succession.
And she has quite deliberately caused doubt, and she has created mischief, knowing that it would damage the royal family. And the alternative is that she didn't give birth to those children, and their only royal link is scraping the bottom of the barrel with ganja-loving Harry.
So you tell me to tell you something that maybe a dozen people actually know that's going to come out very soon. Okay. Meghan Markle, the reason why you watch her interviews and she just seems off. She's owned by a pharmaceutical company. The two children that she had, they're not hers. She didn't have them with Harry. And how her and Harry met is that she's a prostitute.
They weren't conspiracy theories. Actually, they were just malicious lies, weren't they?
Harry and Meghan are dragging their feet about this because they're hoping that if they throw a bit of a tantrum in the lead up, that perhaps the monarchy will say, okay, fine.
For years, the palace said nothing. Not a denial, not a clarification, not even a carefully worded correction tucked away in some forgotten press office statement. Just silence. Interview after interview aired. Podcasts dropped. Books were released, documentaries streamed worldwide, accusations were laid bare straight into living rooms across the globe, and through all of it, Buckingham Palace stood still, almost eerily so, as if it simply refused to hear the noise. For years, Buckingham Palace said nothing. Not a denial, not an explanation, not even a correction. Interview after interview came and went. Podcasts, books, documentaries, accusations delivered directly to the public, and through all of it, the palace stayed quiet as if it simply didn't hear the noise. And that silence, it drove people mad, because when an institution as old and powerful as the monarchy doesn't speak, people assume one of two things. Either it's terrified.
This crisis won't die down until the irrefutable truth comes out.
Or it's calculating. And this time it wasn't fear. But silence doesn't always mean inaction, because recently something changed. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly.
Only two children that there is no proof for is Prince Archie Bunker and Princess Lily.
Behind closed doors, according to people familiar with how the palace actually works, documents were finally finalized. Not drafts, not discussion papers, final paperwork. And those documents didn't deal with media strategy or reputation.
To be relegated to behind the scenes, second row back, that is how they were treated. This is how they'll be treated this time.
They dealt with something far more serious. The future position of two children who never chose this life, Archie and Leet. That's when the weight of it starts to sink in. This wasn't about bruised egos or PR cleanups. This was about children, about records, about status that doesn't change with headlines. While the public argued and social media screamed, something far colder and far more permanent was being decided quietly behind closed doors.
If he has been collusive, he should be removed from the line of succession, and if he doesn't do it voluntarily, It should be done by Parliament.
The message inside those papers wasn't emotional, it wasn't cruel, it was precise. According to insiders, the palace reached a settled position on how far royal recognition would go and where it would stop. Not postponed, not under consideration, settled, settled. That word alone should make anyone pause, because in royal language,
Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet from the UK's royal line of succession until the Duchess provides absolute proof that she popped out both babies herself.
settled doesn't mean temporary. It doesn't mean flexible. It means the door has been measured, marked, and quietly closed. That's when the palace's long silence began to make sense. They weren't frozen. They weren't afraid of public backlash. They were waiting for the moment when procedure mattered more than press, waiting for the point where rules could speak louder than interviews ever could. And suddenly that silence didn't feel empty anymore. It felt strategic, calculated, almost chilling. This isn't about a sudden announcement because that's not how the crown operates. The monarchy doesn't govern through headlines. It governs through systems, records, and time. And once those systems move, they don't move back easily. You're going to have to leave your title at the door. To understand how it ever reached this point, you have to stop thinking about modern gossip for a moment and look much further back, far beyond Meghan, far beyond Harry, back to a time when the monarchy nearly lost everything. To understand what's happening now, you have to leave the modern drama behind and step into a very different moment in history. The year was 1917. Europe was tearing itself apart. Monarchies were collapsing one after another. Kings were being overthrown, exiled, or executed. Royal families across the continent were realizing something terrifying. Crowns didn't fall only from rebellion. They fell from confusion, weak rules, and unclear succession. This wasn't paranoia. This was survival instinct. Watching thrones crumble across Europe did something profound to the British crown. It taught them that tradition alone wasn't enough. Ceremony wasn't enough. Sentiment wasn't enough. King George V was watching this happen in real time, and he understood one thing very clearly. If the British monarchy was going to survive, it needed boundaries, not traditions. People argued about, not customs, people bent, hard rules. So he did something radical for a royal. He put royal identity into writing, not poetry, not ceremony, law. And that decision changed everything, because once identity became law, it stopped being emotional. It became mechanical, cold, unforgiving. It's a waste of the taxpayers' money. It's a waste of taxpayers' time. It's a waste of resources. In a formal legal document, he spelled out exactly who could be called a prince or princess, who could use royal styles, and how far those privileges extended. This wasn't about kindness. It wasn't about family harmony. It was about preventing chaos before it ever started. The title of prince and princess should mean something, and for Harry and Meghan, it's a gigantic publicity stunt. That's the part people don't want to accept. These rules were never written to make anyone feel included. They were written to keep the... That's the part most people miss. These rules weren't created with compassion in mind. They were created with survival in mind. The survival of an institution that knew it could be destroyed from the inside. And once those rules were written, they didn't disappear just because times changed. They stayed, quietly, patiently, waiting for moments exactly like this. It was a giant way for Harry and Meghan to put up a middle finger to the monarchy. Over time, the monarchy softened its image. It smiled more, it explained less, but it never dismantled the system underneath. The rule book stayed. And when Archie and Leet entered the picture, that old document didn't feel outdated. It felt alarmingly relevant. Remove Prince Archie and Princess Light from the UK's royal line of succession until the Duchess provides absolute proof that she popped out both babies herself. Modern chaos doesn't arrive with guillotines, it arrives with ambiguity. And ambiguity is the one thing the monarchy was designed to destroy. Once King George V put those rules into law, the monarchy stopped relying on feelings and started relying on filters. Quiet tests that every royal birth would pass through whether the public noticed them or not. And those filters, they were never loud. They didn't announce themselves, but they watched, they recorded, and they remembered. Over the years, 3 expectations became fixed inside that system, and none of them were optional. The first was bloodline, not rumor, not suggestion, not interpretation, a clear, traceable biological connection that fit within the narrow limits defined by the crown. This wasn't about love or family bonds. It was about certainty. The monarchy learned long ago that once doubt touches the bloodline, it never truly leaves. If she used someone else's egg, even if she then housed it in her own body, those children are not entitled to be in the line of succession. That truth sits like a brick wall, cold, unemotional, unmovable. The second expectation was recognition through process. Royal births were never just announced. They were verified. Doctors were named, documents were signed, witnesses were present. The public announcement came last, not first. Press releases can bend, records cannot. Why did she then seem to lie about it by eventually announcing Meghan was in labor 9 hours after she had actually given birth? The third expectation was tradition. For centuries, royal children weren't just born into a family. They were folded into a system. Baptisms, confirmations, formal presentations, these weren't optional lifestyle choices, they were signals. Signals that the child respected the structure they were entering. Why? Why couldn't we know the doctors? Why couldn't we know the details? That is royal tradition. It was all very very, very odd. None of this was designed to feel warm. It was designed to feel solid. For decades, this system worked without friction because everyone played by the same rules. The paperwork matched the ceremony. The ceremony matched the records. There were no gaps to explain, no shadows to defend. And then Archie was born. On the surface, everything looked familiar. Smiles, photographs, carefully worded statements. But inside the system, something didn't align. Not dramatically, not explosively, just slightly. And in an institution built on precision, slight misalignment matters. I've never believed that the circumstances around the birth of Archie were normal. That was the moment palace staff began watching more carefully. Not out of hostility, out of instinct. Archie's arrival in 2019 should have passed cleanly through the system. A royal child recorded and folded neatly into history. At first glance, it appeared to do exactly that. But inside the paperwork, where the monarchy pays its closest attention, something unusual appeared. The original birth certificate listed Meghan's full name, just like any legal document would. Routine, standard, normal. Then it changed. Quietly, no announcement, no explanation. Meghan's name was removed and replaced with a title alone. Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. And that was not cosmetic. In royal documentation, identity is never styled for elegance. It exists to remove doubt. Birth certificates, especially those connected to succession, are meant to freeze time. Once they move, people notice. There are too many discrepancies in this document for Elizabeth to be in the line of succession. Questions followed. Meghan's side suggested the palace demanded the change. Palace insiders suggested the request came from the Sussexes. Both narratives floated quietly. Neither was confirmed. But that wasn't the real issue. The issue was this. A foundational record had been altered after the fact. Their privacy is trumped by our right to know that no bastard is going to sit on the throne of this country. To the public, nothing seemed wrong. To the palace, a signal had been sent. Not that something was broken, but that something no longer followed pattern. And the monarchy does not react to single incidents. It watches for repetition. That repetition came 2 years later. This time, it wasn't a document. It was an entire birth. By the time Lilibet was born in 2021, the palace was no longer assuming things would resolve themselves. They were watching carefully. What arrived instead was something the system hadn't dealt with in modern times. The announcement didn't come from Buckingham Palace gates. It didn't come with named doctors. It didn't come with the familiar institutional language. It came from California. Breaking right now, new question marks over the veracity of Princess Lily's birth certificate. To the public, it felt modern. Families live abroad. Babies are born overseas. Times change. Inside the palace, it felt like separation. Was the announcement delayed until 1 p.m. in time for the American breakfast TV shows in New York at 8 a.m.? There was no visible hand of the crown, no inward paper trail, no institutional confirmation at the moment of birth, and that mattered. They are private citizens now. That was their choice, and they got to live with it. Then came the baptism, described publicly as joyful and meaningful. Warm photographs, careful wording. Inside the palace, it raised another quiet flag. Royal baptisms were never casual. They tied bloodline, ceremony, and record-keeping together in one moment. This one didn't follow that pattern. Very odd and unnecessary, actually. It makes you think, what are they hiding, and why are they hiding it? Shortly after, the titles appeared publicly. Prince Archie, Princess Lilibet. To supporters, it looked like confirmation. Inside the system, it looked like a pattern forming. Births outside the mechanism. Records altered. Ceremonies disconnected from tradition. Together, they told a story the institution couldn't ignore. And still, the palace said nothing. Because by the time institutions reach conclusions, they stopped talking. The pressure shifted to Harry, and they're not going to get that. Behind the scenes, Harry reached back. Late-night calls, emotional conversations, no aides, no agendas. This wasn't about money, it wasn't about headlines, it was about legacy. He knew how the system worked. He knew once a child is not fully integrated, reversing that decision is nearly impossible. He asked for flexibility, for reassurance, for exceptions. The response wasn't cruel, it was colder. This isn't about emotion, it's about order, lineage, and the future of the crown. That's when reality landed. Harry wasn't speaking to family anymore. He was speaking to a machine designed to outlast kings. The monarchy doesn't confront, it recalibrates. No announcements, no stripping ceremonies, just absence. No future roles planned, no integration, no expectation of duty. On paper, names remain. History moves slowly, but relevance is measured by proximity. When invitations stop coming, it isn't accidental. This is how royal power operates. In the end, the crown didn't explain, it didn't defend, it didn't argue, it chose silence. And in the royal world, silence is the final verdict. Archie and Lilibet may grow up loved and protected, far from palace walls. But history will move forward without waiting. No drama, no speeches, just doors that once closed rarely ever open again.